When Derek Solis walked into the showroom of Low Classic and Collection on a Tuesday afternoon, he was carrying himself the way he carried himself everywhere. Shoulders easy, eyes moving fast. The practiced confidence of a man who had never once entered a room and doubted that he was the most interesting person in it. He sat down across the desk from the man he had been referred to as the company's owner. He glanced at the Ferrari parked in the bay beyond the glass. The same red 488 he had driven 11 times in 6 months. He had told the woman he was seeing about this car, about how a man like him treated a woman right. He had no idea that the man sitting across from him already knew every one of those 11 rentals. He had no idea who he was sitting across from. To understand how Garrett Lowe got here, you have to go back 14 months. Back to a Saturday morning when he came home early, and a red Ferrari was parked in his driveway, and everything he thought he understood about his life changed in the space of a single breath. He did not say a word. Not then. Garrett Lowe had built Low Classic and Collection over 12 years, starting from nothing that looked like much. He had started as a mechanic, not a glamorous trade, but an honest one, and he had been exceptionally good at it. He understood the way machines held together under stress, which parts gave first and which held longest, and why. He had worked for a dealership for 4 years, then an independent shop for 3 more. And in those 7 years he had saved every dollar he didn't need, and put it toward the first vehicle. A 1967 Mustang Fastback, bought at a state auction for less than it was worth, because the previous owner hadn't known what they had. He had restored it himself over 8 months in a rented garage. Then he rented the car out for a weekend wedding. That was how it had started. Now the company occupied a converted warehouse on a commercial strip near the airport. The showroom held 11 vehicles at any given time. The garage in the back held 12 more, in various stages of conditioning, always moving. He had 22 employees, 3 drivers, a full-time detailer, an operations manager named Ray Dominguez, who had been with him for 10 years and knew the business as well as Garrett did, and was as methodical and steady as a man needed to be in order to keep 40-plus machines in perfect condition every single day. Corporate clients were the real engine. Fortune 500 companies renting cars for executive travel, for client entertainment, for events that needed to look a certain way without anyone actually owning anything. 3 accounts alone, Hargrove Industries, Medvance Partners, and Colton Financial, represented $180,000 in contracted annual revenue. Those 3 accounts had taken Garrett 4 years to land. He had built them through patience and reputation, and the specific quality of service that made a client feel like the only client. Diana had helped him land 2 of them. He had met her 6 years ago at a hospitality conference where he had gone to pitch corporate entertainment partnerships. She was on a panel about client experience in the luxury market, and she had a sharpness to her that was hard to mistake for anything else. She knew what she was talking about. She asked questions that got to the center of things quickly. After the panel, she had walked past his booth, looked at the photographs of the fleet, and said, without breaking stride, that his positioning was wrong. He had stopped her and asked what she meant. She had told him, specifically with examples. He had bought her coffee. 3 months later they were dating. 18 months after that, they were married. She had been a single mother when they met. Her daughter Maya was 5 at the time. With her father's complete absence and Diana's complete determination filling the space he had left, Maya was careful around people she didn't know, the particular wariness of a child who had learned that adults could disappear without warning. It had taken her 4 months to stop looking at Garrett like he was a problem that hadn't fully revealed itself yet. Then, one Saturday, he had driven her to a go-kart track at 7 in the morning because she had mentioned once that she wanted to try it. And he had remembered. That was when she stopped being careful. He had legally adopted Maya 2 years into the marriage. The paperwork had been simple. The moment had not been. She had been 7 years old, and she had looked at him in the judge's chamber with an expression he had never forgotten, something between disbelief and the specific relief of a person who has stopped waiting for the thing to be taken back. He thought about that sometimes. He tried not to think about it in ways that made it harder to remain calm. The first sign was the mileage. He had not gone looking for anything. He had not been suspicious in the way a man is when he has reasons. He had simply done what he had always done, paid attention to the details in front of him. Diana drove her own car, a leased Audi, and they had a maintenance agreement with Ray's shop for it. Garrett handled the scheduling himself, because that was the task he handled. He noted the mileage on intake. He noted the mileage on return. In 6 months, the car had logged 4,000 miles more than her commute and stated activities could account for. He had looked at that number for a long moment. Then he had set it down in the part of his mind where things went when they needed to be verified before being acted upon. The second sign was the Ferrari. It was a Saturday in October, 11 in the morning. Garrett had been at the warehouse since 6. He left early because a vendor meeting had canceled, and he drove back through the neighborhood without calling ahead, because he wasn't thinking about calling ahead. He was thinking about the vendor meeting that had canceled and the replacement quote he needed by Monday morning, and the detail on the '71 Camaro that wasn't sitting right. He turned onto his street and stopped the truck. The car in his driveway was a red Ferrari 488. He recognized it before he recognized anything else, because he had looked at that car every day for the past 8 months. It was his car. License plate LCC 488. On his fleet manifest, rented 4 days ago to a man named Derek Solis. Garrett pulled the truck to the curb 40 yards short of his own driveway. He turned off the engine. He sat very still. Diana came out of the front door first. She was dressed as if she were going somewhere. Her hair was done. She was laughing at something. Behind her came a man Garrett did not recognize, broad-shouldered, wearing clothes that announced themselves, moving with the particular ease of someone who was accustomed to entering other men's spaces without announcement. He put his hand on the small of Diana's back at the porch steps, steering, proprietary. She let him. The man turned back toward the car. He spread his arms slightly, presenting it, and he said something Garrett was not close enough to hear, and Diana laughed again. Then the man spoke again, louder this time, and this time Garrett had the window down. "This," he said, "is how you treat a woman. None of that we're working toward something talk. Just results." Diana's laugh was warm. Familiar, Garrett had heard that laugh for 6 years. He sat in the truck with his hands flat on his thighs and let everything register exactly as it was registering, without rushing it, without trying to reduce it to anything simpler than what it was. Then he took a breath, and he drove away. He drove to the warehouse. He didn't go back to the house. He didn't call anyone. He went to the place where the work was, because the work was the one place where the clarity of what needed to happen was never muddled by the noise of what he felt. He punched in the access code and went to his desk in the back office, the one with the whiteboard on one wall and the fleet manifest pinned to another. Ray was in the garage running a pre-detailed check on the Bentley going out Monday. He heard the side door and appeared in the doorway. "Thought your vendor was canceled," Ray said. He was. Ray looked at him. He didn't ask. Garrett opened his laptop. He pulled up the fleet rental records for the past 6 months. He searched Derek Solis. 11 entries. The first was 7 months ago. A Saturday, overnight. The most recent was 4 days ago. Ongoing, due back tomorrow. The durations ranged from 1 night to 3 days. He scrolled through the dates. Then he pulled Diana's calendar, the shared one on the household account, and he compared them column by column. He didn't need to get very far. The overlap was not ambiguous. It was not a coincidence. Each rental aligned with a window when Diana had told him she was somewhere else. Her sister in Raleigh. A marketing conference. A weekend at her friend Christine's. He had offered to come once. She had told him Christine's place was small. The dates matched 11 times. Garrett sat back in his chair. He thought about the mileage on the Audi. He thought about the vendor that had canceled. He thought about that word, results, and the particular way the man had spread his arms, presenting a car he did not own. A car he had rented. A car he had rented from the man whose wife he was standing in front of, neither of them knowing it. He thought about Maya. He let that sit. Then he picked up his phone and called the one person he called when a problem needed to be understood before it could be handled. "Gerald," he said, "I need the weekend." His uncle answered from wherever he always answered from, which was never entirely clear because Gerald Webb existed outside of ordinary schedules by preference and long practice. He had spent 31 years as a CPA, the last 8 of them running his own firm, and he had retired with the particular unhurriedness of a man who had never wasted anything and had plenty left. He was 68 and sharper than most 40-year-olds Garrett knew. "This weekend?" Gerald said. "As soon as you can." A brief pause. "Come for Sunday breakfast. 8 o'clock. "I'll be there," Garrett said. He ended the call. He sat for another moment. Then he texted Ray a single message, "Can you do a full records pull on LCC 488 rentals for the last 8 months? All of them. Print and hold for me." Ray replied in 4 minutes, already on it. Garrett went to the garage. He picked up the work he had left undone, the detail on the 71 Camaro that wasn't sitting right. And he worked. His hands remembered what to do before his mind had to tell them. He worked until the light in the skylight was gone and the garage went cool. And then he straightened up and looked at what he'd done. The car looked right. He went home. Diana was in the kitchen making dinner as if it were an ordinary Saturday evening. She kissed him on the cheek when he came in and said she'd been running errands all day and asked how the vendor meeting had gone. He told her it had been canceled. He told her about the Camaro detail. He asked about her day. She told him about the errands. He listened to her describe a day that had not happened, and he did not let a single thing cross his face. He ate dinner. He helped clear the plates. He watched Maya run through the living room in socks, sliding on the hardwood, and he heard her laugh, and he held everything he was feeling at exactly the right distance. He was very good at holding things at the right distance. After dinner, he poured a glass of water and went to the back room, where he kept a separate laptop for business planning. He opened the shared marriage financial accounts. He was methodical. He was not looking for a specific thing. He was looking for the shape of things, the pattern. He had learned long ago that the most reliable way to understand a system was to look at what it produced over time, not what it was supposed to produce. He found 3 things that did not sit right. The first was a series of lunches. Business credit card, Diana's subsidiary card on the company account. She had a card for business development expenses. 14 lunches in 6 months, all at the same 2 downtown restaurants, all in amounts consistent with 2 people, all on days she had not mentioned meetings. He had not noticed at the time because 14 lunches over 6 months did not rise to the level of a pattern at first glance. In a column, lined up, they did. The second was a consulting invoice, paid from the company's operating account 4 months ago. $2,400 to a firm called Stratford Client Solutions. He did not recognize the name. He searched it. The firm's website was thin, a logo and contact page, and a list of services that said nothing specific. The address was a registered agent service. The third was an email, forwarded from Diana's company account to her personal address. He had access to the company email. He owned the company. It was in his security setup, and he almost never looked at it. Because he trusted the people he worked with, and because he was not in the habit of surveillance. This time he looked. The email was a thread between Diana and Michael Hargrove. the corporate liaison for Hargrove Industries, one of Garrett's 3 anchor accounts. The thread was 8 weeks old. Diana was managing the relationship, which was appropriate, which was part of what he paid her to do. But the thread contained something he read twice. Michael Hargrove had asked whether Garrett would be open to a conversation about their fleet arrangement. Diana had written back, "I'll have to check with Garrett on timing. But I want to make sure you know there are other options in the market right now that might fit your needs better. I'd hate for you to feel locked in." She had written that in his company email, from his company account, about his anchor client, recommending that the client look elsewhere. He closed the laptop. He sat in the dark for a while. Then he picked up a legal pad and a pen and wrote down everything he knew. Not because he couldn't remember it without writing. He could, but because putting it on paper was how he began to understand what he was looking at. He had always thought better on paper. Some people used it as a brainstorm. He used it as a blueprint, a way to see if what he was building had the right load distribution before he trusted his weight to it. By the time he finished, the legal pad had 3 columns. The first was what he knew. The second was what he needed to verify. The third was what he needed to do, in order before he made a single move. He circled 4 things in the third column. Then he turned off the light and went to bed. He slept adequately. Not well. Adequately, which was what he needed. Gerald Webb's house sat on a half-acre lot in a neighborhood where the oak trees were older than most of the people who lived there. The kitchen was large and practical, and it smelled on Sunday mornings, like something that had been cooking since before Garrett arrived. Gerald made real breakfasts, the kind with multiple components and actual timing required. He said that cooking was the one activity that required both precision and intuition, which was why surgeons and engineers often did it well. Garrett sat at the kitchen table and watched his uncle move around the stove and told him everything. He laid it out in columns, the way he had written it. The mileage, the rentals, the dates, the email thread, the consulting invoice, the lunches. He spoke without editorializing. He gave Gerald the facts the way he would give a mechanic a symptom report, specific, in sequence, without diagnosis until the mechanic had all the information. Gerald listened. He flipped the bacon. He did not turn around until Garrett was finished. Then he set a plate in front of Garrett and sat down across from him. "Maya," he said. "Yes," Garrett said. Gerald nodded slowly. He understood the shape of that without needing it explained. "Okay," he said. "Let me tell you what I see." He picked up his fork. He ate a bite of egg. He set it down. "You have a woman who has been using a company credit card to build relationships she isn't disclosing to the company owner, who is also her husband. You have an email that is either incompetence or sabotage. You have 11 rental records that line up not coincidentally with 11 absences she explained to you as other things. And you have a consulting payment to a shell." He paused. "The shell is the one I'd look at first." "Stratford Client Solutions," Garrett said. "The address is a registered agent?" "Yes, that address is used by people who want a business entity on paper without an office in the world. That's not illegal. But it's a choice, and choices mean something." Gerald looked at him. "The question is whether the money moved somewhere specific, whether it was a one-time thing or a pattern, whether it was your money paying for something designed to work against you." He drank his coffee. "You'll need to see the business bank records going back at least a year. All of it. Not just what you can access from home." "I can get those," Garrett said. "They're mine." "You'll also need an attorney," Gerald said. "Family law. Someone who handles high-asset marriages with business holdings. Because if she's been cultivating your clients, there's a conversation to be had about tortious interference. And if she's directing company funds outside the business, that's a separate conversation entirely." He named an attorney. "Karen Settle. She's been practicing 30 years in this city. She doesn't lose asset cases. He paused. She's also the last person in that world who will feel sorry for anyone who doesn't deserve it. Can you make the call? I already did, Gerald said. Friday, after you texted me. Garrett looked at him. Gerald picked up his fork again. You only call me on the weekend when something's already wrong, he said. I thought I should be ready. This was the specific value of a man who had watched you since you were 12 years old and understood how you worked without you explaining it. Garrett ate his breakfast. The eggs were exactly right. Karen Settle's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown, and it looked like the office of a woman who had spent 30 years winning cases and keeping score. Clean surfaces, organized shelves, a window that looked out at the city without sentiment. She was 60-something, with reading glasses on a chain and the particular economy of movement that comes from never wasting time. She shook Garrett's hand with a grip that meant something. She read the documents he brought. She asked 4 questions. She did not ask unnecessary ones. The email, she said, the one where she encouraged the client to look elsewhere. Do you have it on a device you control? I printed it, Garrett said, and I took a screenshot from my admin access. Good, that email is important. It establishes a pattern of behavior that benefits someone other than you, using resources that belong to you. She set the page down. Tell me about the consulting payment. He told her what he'd found. She wrote something on her legal pad. We're going to pull the complete business financial records, she said. Everything for the past 18 months. If the Stratford payment is connected to anything else, we need to see the full picture before we file. She looked up. One thing I need you to understand. You cannot signal that anything has changed. Not to Diana, not to anyone connected to the business. The moment she understands you're building a case, assets move. They always move. She held his gaze. Can you maintain that? Yes, Garrett said, without hesitation. Because it was true. The 2 weeks that followed had a particular quality to them that Garrett would not have been able to explain to most people. From the outside, nothing had changed. He went to work. He came home. He ate dinners that Diana prepared with a care that was either genuine or strategic, and he chose not to distinguish between the two, because the distinction did not change what he needed to do. He talked to Maya about her science project, which involved a potato battery that was producing less voltage than she needed. He helped her troubleshoot it. He asked about her day. He was present. He had always been present. Ray had the rental records on his desk Monday morning. 11 entries, full documentation, client agreement on file. Every rental that Derek Solis had made. Every card swipe. Every vehicle log. Garrett read through them over a cup of coffee in the back office while the morning crew started the first shift outside. The credit card on file was Derek's business card. Solis Capital Group. He had signed the standard rental agreement on the first visit, which included low classic and collections standard terms. The client consented to vehicle tracking for insurance and fleet management purposes. This was standard industry practice. Every vehicle in the fleet had GPS logging. Garrett had never used that feature for anything other than insurance claims and stolen vehicle recovery. He looked at the file for a moment. He opened the GPS log for LCC 488. He cross-referenced the 11 rental dates. The car had been in his neighborhood on 6 of those dates. One of those 6 was the Saturday he had come home early. He did not look at the specific addresses of where else it had been. He did not need to. He had what he needed to build the structure. He didn't need to overload it. What he built in those 2 weeks was not fueled by anger. Anger was a variable that introduced error into the work. What he had instead was clarity. The same clarity he brought to a mechanical diagnosis. Something is wrong. These are the symptoms. This is the cause. This is the repair. Ray found him in the bay one afternoon, working on the '67 Mustang, the original car, the first one. which he had kept and maintained because it was where the company began. Ray sat on a parts bench and watched him work for a while. "Something's going on," Ray said. Garrett kept working. "Yes. You need anything from me?" "I need everything to run normal." Ray nodded. He picked up a wrench and rolled it over in his hands. He set it down. "Diana's been in twice this week," he said, making calls from the back conference room. Door closed. Garrett reached for a socket. "What days?" "Tuesday and Thursday." He didn't respond to that immediately. He worked the socket into place. "Then, if she asks you anything about the Hargrove account, the Medvance account, or Colton Financial, anything at all, I want you to come straight to me before you say anything." Ray looked at him. "Already done," he said. That was the thing about Ray. He didn't require explanation. He operated on trust, and trust went both ways, and he had learned a long time ago that Garrett Lowe did not tell you to do a thing without a reason for it. Karen Settle called on a Thursday morning with the financial records summary her firm had pulled. "The Stratford Client Solutions payment," she said. 18 months. One entry. She paused. "But there are two others." "What kind?" "Two separate vendor payments. Different names, both to registered agent addresses. One 4 months ago, one 7 months ago. Total across the three, just under $8,000. She let that sit. "None of them appear in any business correspondence I can locate. No contract attached. No deliverable documented. These are payments made from your company's operating account that have no evident business purpose." Garrett said nothing. He thought about a word. "Results? I need to know where those payments went," he said. "I have a forensic accountant on it," Karen said. 2 days. He ended the call. He went back to work. He was training a new detail technician that morning. A methodical young woman who asked good questions. He spent 3 hours walking her through the prep process, the inspection sequence. The difference between a detailed job that looked right and one that actually was. The company's legal structure was the first thing Gerald had asked about on Sunday morning, and it was the first thing Karen Settle had asked about when Garrett sat across her desk. Was the business incorporated before the marriage? Yes. Was there a prenuptial agreement covering the business? Yes. A simple one, drafted at Gerald's insistence 3 months before the wedding. It had been the most awkward conversation Garrett had ever initiated, and Diana had been unhurried about signing it, which had reassured him at the time. Now he understood why. She had not been planning to come at the business. She had been planning to build a private position and a client-based exit that would leave the business intact while extracting everything that sat beside it. She was patient. He would give her that. The forensic accountant Karen used was a woman named Phyllis Rowe, who had spent 20 years tracing money through structures designed to make it untraceable. She worked quietly, and she worked fast. And she did not call with preliminary findings, because preliminary findings were not findings. She called when she was certain. She called on a Thursday morning, 2 weeks after engagement. The 3 vendor payments had moved through a single registered agent service in Delaware, a state chosen. She explained with the neutral tone of a woman delivering a fact rather than a judgment. Because Delaware's registration requirements made the receiving entities difficult to trace quickly. The final destination was a personal checking account in Diana's name at a credit union where she had held an account since before the marriage. The account had been opened for ordinary purposes. The 3 deposits had arrived in the ordinary flow of that account. Without looking for them specifically, they would have been invisible inside the pattern of ordinary transactions. She used a structure that works when no one is looking closely, Phyllis said. "Someone is looking closely," Garrett said. "Yes," she said. "That's why we found it." He was patient with her. He was always patient. This was the build of it. The slow, unremarkable accumulation of everything he needed. Day by day, layer by layer, the way you pour a foundation. You don't rush a cure. You don't apply load before the concrete sets. You wait until it's ready. Then it holds. The call from Michael Hargrove at Hargrove Industries came on a Monday. Garrett was in the warehouse reviewing the quarterly maintenance schedule when Simone Okafor knocked on the office door and said, "Hargrove on line 2. Says he wants to talk to you directly." Simone was 35, precise, the person whose emails were always shorter than they needed to be, and always said exactly enough. He had hired her 2 years ago for corporate account management, and she had exceeded every benchmark he had set in the first 3 months, and then started improving on benchmarks he hadn't thought to set. She was the best hire he had made in a decade. "Put him through," Garrett said. He picked up the phone. He listened. He said very little. What Michael Hargrove said, in the careful, measured language of a man who had been coached on how to have this conversation, was that Hargrove Industries was reviewing their vendor relationships as part of an annual efficiency audit, and that they had been approached by another fleet provider with a proposal that was, in his words, compelling. He said he had been meaning to have this conversation for a while, and he hoped they could part on good terms. Garrett asked who the provider was. Hargrove paused. Then he said the name, Premier Fleet Group. Garrett knew Premier Fleet Group, a mid-size operation, younger than his, with lower margins and a less refined fleet. He also knew, now, who had introduced them to Hargrove. He told Hargrove he appreciated the call. He wished the company well. He did not argue. He did not pitch. He let it go cleanly. He put the phone down. Within the week, Medvance Partners called with the same message. 48 hours after that, he received a formal notice from Colton Financial that they were choosing not to renew their fleet agreement. 3 accounts. In 11 days. $180,000 in contracted annual revenue. He had not seen the pace of it coming. He had underestimated how far Diana's work had advanced. She had not been cultivating those relationships for his benefit. She had been cultivating them for leverage, and she had timed the exits with a precision that told him she had been working toward this for at least 6 months. The setback was real. He sat in his back office with the door closed and looked at the operating projection for the next quarter. He adjusted the numbers. He ran the math with the 3 accounts gone, and the 3 accounts gone and a slower replacement timeline than he would have preferred. The company was not in danger. His margins were not so thin that losing $180,000 in annual revenue created a crisis. But it was $180,000 he had spent years building. It was 3 accounts that had required 4 years of consistent relationship management. It was a deliberate subtraction carried out from inside the house, using access he had given her because he had trusted her. He thought about that for exactly as long as it took him to understand it fully. Then, he called Simone into the office. She sat across from him with her notepad. She didn't ask what had happened. She had seen the notices come in. "I need to rebuild 3 corporate accounts," he said. "Same tier. Same contract value, or better. I want a prospect list by end of week. Companies in the region with existing executive travel budgets that don't have a luxury fleet partner. Not mid-tier. Not companies that are price-sensitive. Companies where the fleet experience is part of how they present themselves." Simone made a note. "Any industry focus?" "Financial services, consulting, and pharma. Same verticals as what we lost. We know how to serve them." She looked at the notepad. "I'll have it Friday." She did. The list was 12 companies organized by estimated travel budget, with 2 notes per entry, what Garrett's fleet offered that their current solution didn't, and who the likely decision-maker was. He read it over the weekend, made 3 margin notes, and handed it back to her Monday morning. "Start with the top 4, he said. "Set the meetings." She had the first meeting scheduled by Wednesday. This was the recovery. Not dramatic, not triumphant, just the next thing, done with the same care as everything before it. A machine that has lost a component does not stop. You replace the component. You run the diagnostic. You make sure the rest is still sound. Then you drive. While Simone was building the new account pipeline, Garrett was completing the other work. Karen Settle had the forensic accounting report by the end of the week she had promised. The 3 vendor payments, $7,900 total, had not gone to any business service. They had gone, through a single hop transfer at a registered agent service, to a personal account held by Diana. That personal account had been opened 14 months ago, 4 months before the marriage showed any outward sign of strain. She had not been acting impulsively. She had been building a plan. Gerald Webb heard the financial report and was quiet for a long moment. They were at his kitchen table again, second Sunday breakfast, the same kitchen, the same seat. The account predates any visible trouble, he said, by at least 6 months. Yes, then the marriage didn't fail and cause this, Gerald said. The planning happened first. The failure was the cover. Garrett nodded. He had already reached that conclusion. He was just letting Gerald say it, because sometimes a thing needed to be said out loud. Karen Settle had the complete filing ready by the 3rd week. The divorce petition. The financial fraud claim on the diverted vendor payments. The tortious interference documentation on the 3 accounts. Diana had used company resources, her company credit card, and company email to direct clients away from the company. That was not a gray area. That was documented, dated, actionable. There was one additional item Karen had added to the file. The GPS logs for LCC 488 on the 6 dates when the vehicle had been in Garrett's neighborhood. She had subpoenaed the fleet logs, which were admissible under the standard tracking disclosure clients signed. The logs placed Derek Solis's rented vehicle at the address of the marital home on 6 occasions when Garrett was documented elsewhere. On 2 of those dates, Diana had told Garrett she was in Raleigh. All of it was in the file. "When do you want to serve her?" Karen asked. "Not yet," Garrett said. "There's one more thing I need to do first." He had been thinking about Derek Solis. Not with anger, with the specific focus of a man who understands that a structure has multiple load points, and that addressing only the visible ones leaves the underlying problem intact. Diana was one load point, but Derek Solis had driven his car, rented from his company to his home to be with his wife. He had stood in Garrett's driveway, in front of Garrett's car, and delivered a line about how to treat a woman, and he had also apparently been instrumental in steering Garrett's corporate clients toward Premier Fleet Group. Karen had found that a consulting relationship between Solis Capital Group and Premier Fleet Group disclosed in a filing dated 8 months ago. Derek Solis had been feeding Premier Fleet Group leads. Garrett's clients, in at least 2 of the 3 cases, had been introduced to Premier Fleet through Solis Capital Group contacts. The introduction had originated with Diana. The referral had gone through Derek. This was not a coincidence. This was a system. Garrett thought about what Simone had put on that prospect list. The way she had organized it. The notes in the margins. He thought about the new detail technician asking the right questions. He thought about Ray in the garage, reliable and steady, not requiring explanation. He thought about a '67 Mustang Fastback bought at a state auction because nobody else had known what it was worth. Then he called Derek Solis's assistant and requested a meeting. He said the meeting was about a fleet partnership opportunity. The assistant scheduled it for the following Tuesday afternoon at Low Classic and Collections showroom. Derek Solis arrived on Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon in the red Ferrari 488. Of course he did. He drove it into the showroom's client parking, the designated space near the front, where the good light made everything look its best. He stepped out the way he stepped out of everything, taking a moment, allowing himself to be looked at. He had on a gray jacket that cost money and shoes that cost more. He was a man who used his appearance as a form of advance preparation. He liked to arrive already winning. He came through the glass doors and spoke to the receptionist, Priya. who had been with the company 3 years and ran the front desk with the efficiency of someone who understood that first impressions were not accidents. She smiled at him and brought him to the showroom waiting area, offered him water, and told him Mr. Lowe would be right with him. Derek looked around the showroom. He recognized several of the vehicles. He had driven one of them 11 times. He appeared to find this amusing on some level. The private amusement of a man who believed he understood more about the world than the world understood about him. Garrett watched him through the interior glass for 30 seconds. Then he walked in. He did not hurry. He did not perform anything. He walked from the back corridor into the showroom at the pace he always walked at, which was the pace of a man who never needed to announce himself, because his presence did that. He extended his hand. Derek shook it with the firm, calibrated grip he used for people he considered worth calibrating for. "Garrett Lowe," Garrett said. "Thanks for coming in." Derek looked at him. Something registered, not quite recognition, but the preliminary movement of it. A face that was familiar in a way he couldn't locate. "Derek Solis," he said. "Appreciate the invitation. I hear good things about your operation." "Sit down," Garrett said. They sat. Derek leaned back slightly, one arm on the table, the posture of a man who preferred to be the one who decided how comfortable the room was going to be. He launched into his pitch without waiting for Garrett to ask. He had a network of corporate clients, he said, high-end, people whose travel expectations required a certain level of service. He was looking for a fleet partner who could match that standard. He had heard Low Classic and Collection had the right reputation. He talked for several minutes. He was smooth. He had done this before. Garrett let him finish. Then he opened the folder in front of him. "I appreciate that," he said. "Before we go further, I'd like to review your rental account with us." Derek's posture shifted. Fractionally, a small adjustment at the shoulder. "My rental account? You've been a client of this company." Garrett turned the first page toward him. 11 rentals. The most recent concluded last week. He slid the sheet across. "Your name is on the agreement." Derek looked at the page. He looked at it the way a person looks at something they recognize but have not expected to see in this context, in this room, in the possession of this specific person. His face was very still. "I own this company," Garrett said. He said it the way he said everything. No additional weight, no performance. Just the fact. Placed in the room. The silence that followed was not short. Derek looked up from the page. Something behind his eyes was running very fast, moving through calculations, seeking exits, finding angles. The composure he had walked in with was still present on the surface. But something beneath it had changed. The particular quality of a man who has just realized the room he entered is not the room he thought it was. "I see," Derek said. His voice was careful. "The vehicle you drove here today," Garrett said. "LCC 488. You've rented it 11 times. The rental agreements are on file with your credit card." He turned another page. "The dates on these rentals are something I want you to see." He slid the second page across. 11 dates, listed in column. Beside each date, a corresponding entry from Diana's shared calendar, trips, visits, absences. The alignment was visually undeniable. You did not need to calculate it. You just looked at it. Derek looked at it. He said nothing. "These dates," Garrett said, "correspond to times when my wife told me she was in other places." He touched the page once, lightly, and withdrew his hand. "You were at my house on 6 of those dates. I have GP's logs for the vehicle. They're admissible. They're already in a legal file." He let the word legal sit for a moment. He watched Derek absorb it. Derek looked at the Jeep pages without speaking. "On the first date in this column," Garrett said, "you were parked outside my house for 4 hours." He touched the entry. "Diana told me she was visiting her sister in Raleigh that weekend." He moved his finger down. "On this date, she told me she had a marketing conference." Another entry. "This date, She said she was at her friend Christine's. He looked at Derek, and on the afternoon of October 11th, Garrett said, "You were standing in my driveway, in that car, telling my wife, and I want to be precise about this, because I remember it clearly, that this is how you treat a woman, that there's no more we're working towards something talk, just results." He said it without heat. He said it the way he would read a specification from a parts list. Derek's composure did not crack. It vacated. The particular smooth confidence he had carried in through the glass doors simply left his face, the way air leaves a sealed container when you open the wrong side. What remained was smaller than what had walked in. Considerably smaller. "You were at my house," Garrett said, "in a car you rented from my company, while I was paying for the fuel and maintenance on it, speaking to my wife about how a man treats a woman. One sentence. It did not need more than one. The fleet accounts you discussed steering toward us," Garrett continued. "Hargrove Industries, Medvance Partners, and Colton Financial. Those were accounts we held for 4 years. They were recently redirected to Premier Fleet Group through introductions that trace back to Solis Capital." He opened the second folder. He placed a document on the table, the consulting relationship disclosure, the filing date, the name of the firm. "This is already documented in the legal file as well." Derek looked at the document. His mouth moved once, closed, in total, Garrett said. The company sustained $180,000 in lost contracted revenue from those 3 accounts. The mechanism of that loss, using company resources to redirect clients, with introductions routed through a party in a personal relationship with the company's employee, constitutes tortious interference under North Carolina law. He paused. "My attorney uses that phrase. I'm told it applies." This was the moment, not the moment Garrett had imagined in the parking lot on that October Saturday, if he had allowed himself to imagine it. He had not allowed himself to imagine it. He had allowed himself to build it, piece by piece, until it was standing on its own, without him needing to hold it up. This was what it looked like when it was standing. Derek Solis had arrived in a Ferrari that he had rented from the man across from him. He had come to this meeting to pitch a business relationship to a man he had not known he already had a relationship with. He had walked into the room believing he understood the situation. He had understood nothing about it. He exhaled, slowly, the controlled exhale of a man trying to maintain the surface even as everything underneath it had shifted. "What do you want?" he said, and the smoothness had left his voice. What remained was just a question. "I don't want anything from you," Garrett said. He closed both folders. He placed his hands flat on the table. "I want you to understand that the documentation exists, that it's in a file, and that how my attorney uses that file depends entirely on the decisions made in the next several weeks by several parties." He stood. "Thank you for coming in." He walked to the showroom door. He opened it. Derek Solis sat at the table for a moment longer than necessary. Then he stood. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. He walked past Garrett to the glass front door. He did not look at the red Ferrari on his way to his car. Garrett watched him go. Then he closed the showroom door. He walked back to his office. He sat down. He poured a glass of water. He drank it. Ray appeared in the doorway 5 minutes later. He looked at Garrett. He did not ask. "Call Simone," Garrett said. "Tell her the Westbrook meeting is confirmed?" "Confirmed this morning," Ray said. "Good," Garrett said. "Let's go over the prep." The papers were served to Diana on a Thursday morning at 9:07. She was in the kitchen when the process server knocked. She opened the door in the unhurried way of a woman who was expecting a package. The envelope the process server handed her was a different shape than a package, and she knew immediately that the difference mattered. She held it with both hands. She called Garrett at 9:22. He watched his phone ring. He let it go to voicemail. He was in a meeting with Simone and the Westbrook Group's travel director, A crisp conversation about fleet specifications and contract terms that was going well in the specific way that conversations go when both parties understand they want the same outcome. He called Diana back at 11:15. Her voice had the quality of a woman who had been composing herself for 2 hours and had not entirely succeeded. "What is this?" she said. "It's a divorce filing," Garrett said. "The cover page explains the proceedings. You filed without telling me. I'm telling you now." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "This has financial claims in it." "There are claims about the business accounts." "There are," he said. "Garrett, She started a sentence 3 different ways before she found the one she wanted. "I was trying to protect myself. The marriage wasn't working. I needed to have something in place if—" "Diana," he said, "I'm not going to argue about the framing. The documentation is in the file. My attorney will discuss it with yours." She moved to a different angle. "What about Maya?" This was the question he had anticipated. This was the question he had thought about the most, and the one for which he had given himself the most careful answer. "Maya is my daughter," he said. "She was my daughter before the filing, and she is my daughter after it. That is not a negotiation. I want to be in her life. I intend to be in her life. If you make that easy, it stays easy. If you complicate it, it becomes part of the legal file." He paused. "I'd prefer easy." Diana was quiet. "Garrett," she said. Her voice was smaller than it had been at the beginning of the call. "I know I hurt you." "You did," he said. It was not an accusation. It was an acknowledgement. He ended the call. He sat with the phone in his hand for a moment. Then he put it in his pocket and went back to work. Karen Settle moved the proceedings with the efficiency she had been applying to family law for 30 years. The financial fraud claim, the 3 vendor payments totaling $7,900, diverted through shell entities to Diana's personal account, was supported by documentation that left no room for a duress defense. The tortious interference documentation on the 3 corporate accounts was clean. Diana's business credit card statements, her company email, and the consulting relationship between Solus Capital and Premier Fleet Group were all in evidence. The causation was traceable. The math was clear. The marital estate was primarily the business. Karen valued Low Classic and Collection as a going concern at $2.3 million, based on fleet value, contracts in force, and historical earnings. Diana had no ownership stake in the company. It had been incorporated before the marriage, and there was no co-ownership agreement. Her claim on the marital estate was therefore limited to other shared assets: the house, joint savings, and retirement accounts. Diana's attorney made an argument for a share of business value based on spousal contribution to growth. Karen Settle responded with the email directing Hargrove Industries to look elsewhere. She noted that the same period in which Diana was providing that direction to a client also coincided with the personal account deposits. She said, in the language that attorneys use when they are entirely certain of their position, the evidence does not support the characterization of contribution. The judge was attentive. He read the documents. The house sold 7 weeks later. Diana moved into an apartment. The settlement she had envisioned, the one built on 18 months of quiet preparation, on 13 lunches with corporate contacts, on 3 vendor payments to a registered agent, on 11 Ferrari rentals timed to Garrett's absences, had not materialized. She ended up with a share of the joint savings, a percentage of the retirement accounts accumulated during the marriage, and a child support calculation based on a co-parenting arrangement that Garrett had agreed to because Maya deserved stability, and he was a man who provided what his daughter needed regardless of what her mother had done. It was not nothing. It was considerably less than what she had planned. Derek Solis did not hear from Karen Settle's office in the weeks that followed the showroom meeting. What he heard from instead were his own clients. The documentation Garrett had placed in the legal file, the consulting disclosure, the fleet referral relationships, The dated GPS logs placing his rented vehicle at a marital address had been produced in discovery. Discovery filings, once made, become available to parties who request them. Two of Derek's institutional investors requested documentation of material relationships as part of a routine audit. One of them found the name Solis Capital Group, associated with a domestic litigation filing in the Discovery records. The audit expanded. The Premier Fleet Group relationship had been disclosed. The client steering had not been. The audit concluded that Derek had created undisclosed conflicts of interest in at least 2 investment relationships. One institutional partner withdrew. A second suspended their capital commitment pending further review. A private lending relationship that Derek had been cultivating for 18 months. Nearly complete, was quietly put on hold. His operation did not collapse. He was a resourceful man, and he had built a resourceful structure. But a structure built on the assumption that no one was watching, maintained by the confidence that attention could always be redirected, had been exposed to load it was not designed to carry. It bent. Not the glamorous sudden failure of a building in a storm, the slower, permanent settlement of a foundation that was never poured right. He was still there, still performing, still driving nice cars, just no longer one of Garrett's. His account at Low Classic and Collection had been closed. As of the Tuesday, he walked out of the showroom and did not look at the Ferrari. He had not allowed himself to feel this until the settlement was signed. That was a discipline he had maintained through all of it. The 14 months, the discovery process, the document production, the deposition that Diana's attorney had requested, and Garrett had attended with the same composure he brought to everything. He had maintained the discipline because the work required it. You do not allow a variable to run uncontrolled while you are running the diagnostic. You finish the diagnostic. Then, you decide what to feel. The settlement was signed on a Wednesday morning. He sat in Karen Settle's office and signed the documents. Karen shook his hand with the same grip as the first day, which told him she considered the outcome what it should have been. He drove back to the warehouse. He went to the back office. He closed the door. He sat for 20 minutes and let it be exactly as large as it was. The 6 years, the marriage he had believed in, the mornings he had worked before sunrise, and the dinners he had come home to and the person he thought he was building something with. He let all of it land. Not to punish himself with it, not to perform it, just to give it the room it deserved before he set it down. Then he got up. He opened the door. He went to the garage. The work was there. The work was always there. 7 months after the papers were served, Garrett replaced all 3 corporate accounts. Not with smaller clients. Not with compromises. With 3 accounts in the same tier, 2 of them in verticals he had not previously served, both of them introduced through Simone Okafor's prospect list. The Westbrook Group signed a 12-month fleet agreement in October. A pharmaceutical firm called Eris Partners came in November, larger than anything he had held before, with a multi-vehicle requirement that added a line to the fleet manifest. A consulting group in December completed the set. The new contracted revenue exceeded the old by $40,000 annually. He did not celebrate this in any dramatic way. He noted it in the quarterly report. He told Simone. She nodded and said she had already started on the Q2 retention plan. He told her that was exactly right. Ray Dominguez had been running the operations side with the same steady competence he had brought to it for a decade. He had not asked for a raise in 2 years. Garrett gave him one anyway, retroactively applied, with an adjustment in his title to reflect what he actually did, which was run the operational infrastructure of a company that had just navigated the disruption most businesses don't survive cleanly. Gerald Webb came by the warehouse on a Saturday morning in the spring. He walked through the showroom and the garage with his hands in his pockets and looked at everything without comment, the way a man looks at something he has known for a long time and wants to give proper attention to. He stopped near the '67 Mustang Fastback, still in its original position near the back of the showroom bay. He put his hand on the fender. "You started with this one," he said. "Yes," Garrett said. Gerald nodded. He was quiet for a moment. "You know what I always thought about this car?" He kept his hand on the fender. "Every time a man brings something to auction for less than it's worth, it's because he didn't know what it was, didn't understand what he had." He looked at Garrett. The trick was always knowing before anyone else did. Garrett said nothing. He looked at the car. "You knew," Gerald said. "You've always known." He came for breakfast after. The kitchen at Gerald's house smelled the same as it always did, and the table was the same table, and Garrett sat in the same chair, and the morning light came through the same window. Some things do not change. Some things were always meant to hold. Maya came for her weekend with Garrett the first Friday of every month, and sometimes more often when Diana's schedule required it, and sometimes just because Maya asked, which she did more than either of them had expected. She was 11 now, in the specific middle age of childhood where everything is both very important and very funny. And she moved through Garrett's apartment with the ease of someone who knows exactly where things are. She had a drawer in the spare room. She had a shelf for her books. She had memorized which cabinet held the good cereal. She asked him once, not long after the settlement, whether he was okay. He looked at her. He said he was. She studied him with the careful attention she had always brought to things she wasn't sure about. Then she nodded in the way she nodded when she had decided she believed something. "Good," she said. "Because I still have a potato battery that's not producing enough voltage." He told her they'd work on it after dinner. They did. The spring morning when Garrett opened the warehouse and walked the floor before the crew arrived, the light was coming through the clerestory windows at the eastern end, long and flat and particular in the way that light is particular in April. It moved across the hoods of the cars in sequence, each one picking it up and passing it along. He walked the floor slowly. He pressed his palm to the bonnet of the '67 Mustang, the same way he had the first morning after he bought it, just to feel it. Cool, solid, the metal had absorbed 12 years of work and care and the specific attention of a man who understood what held and what didn't. He had bought it knowing what it was worth. He had built everything from it. The company ran clean. The fleet held its weight. Every vehicle on that floor had been maintained to a standard that did not require the customer to trust his word. You could see it, in the even finish, the quiet engines, the documentation that was always exactly current, in 22 employees who showed up every day and did the work, in a fleet manifest that had grown from 1 car to 43, from a rented garage to a converted warehouse with a showroom window that caught the morning light exactly right. He had been a man who worked 80 hours a week, who trusted the wrong structure without inspecting the foundation, who drove home one October morning and found something he hadn't expected in his driveway, and who sat in his truck for exactly as long as he needed to, and then drove away to do the work. Some things are built to look impressive from a distance. Others are built to carry actual weight over actual time. Garrett Lowe had always known the difference. Simone texted him at noon to confirm the Aris Partners meeting was moved to Thursday. He replied that Thursday was good. She replied immediately with a confirmation and the name of the room. That was Simone. Efficient, reliable, built for the long run. He stood in his warehouse in the April morning and looked at what 12 years of that difference had built. He had nowhere to be for another 45 minutes. He was precisely where he had decided to be. If this story stayed with you, leave a like and subscribe. The next one is coming, and I think it's one you'll want to hear. Some things are built to last. This channel is one of them.